PJ Fleck and the Minnesota Golden Gophers have a big year ahead of them. After a disappointing season and some turnover on the roster and the coaching staff, the Gophers are hoping that the top 10 returning players that we'll talk about today can make things better than what last year looked like. We start with a guy who's going to be the bell cow for Minnesota, and that's Darius Taylor. The running back had a big year for Minnesota and sent a number of people to the transfer portal because of his efforts. 799 yards, 5 touchdowns. He's a big time player that is just getting things started with his career, and he is going to be an absolute force for this offense. This is a rushing attack that was still the focal point of Minnesota's offense last year, and they're hoping to find a little bit more balance. But Darius Taylor for sure will keep things going. The passing attack, like I mentioned, needs to help out in that regard. If you're going to find balance, the passing attack needs to be better. This was a passing attack that was one of the worst in college football, and Daniel Jackson is back to make sure that that happens, to make sure that they are going to be a better group. And we saw what he could do last year, a big time player for this team, 831 yards, 8 touchdowns. He was most remembered probably for his double move against Nebraska to give Minnesota the go ahead touchdown in what was a defensive battle to begin the year. Gave them the win and showed that he is a reliable pass catcher with a new quarterback coming into town. That's going to be vital. And Daniel Jackson is someone who's going to give a secondary a lot of trouble, and he will be someone that can get things off to a great start. It's just a matter of if everyone else around him can step up as well. Protecting that quarterback will be key too. And Arianta Ursary is someone that is probably flying under the radar because no one really knows who he is. Not a lot of people pay attention to Minnesota football, especially in the Big Ten. You're going to find other teams that you pay attention to, the Ohio States, the Michigans, those kind of teams technically are going to be those bigger names that everyone just flocks to automatically. Minnesota kind of flies under the radar in that regard. But Ursary is someone who is a big time talent, someone who can get the job done for this offensive line, an experienced player. And like I said, if you're going to find balance, the passing attack needs to take a step forward, and keeping your quarterback upright is going to be the first step. Flipping to the defensive side of the ball, Jack Henderson is a do-it-all guy for this defense. He's a former transfer himself who found a role at the nickelback position for Minnesota, and I expect him to do the same thing this year. He's someone who is a high energy guy, which fits in perfectly with what Fleck wants to do with his culture and with his team. And Henderson is someone who can be a leader on the defense, someone who can get that group going. And this is an underrated group now. Rossi is gone, so you have to find who is going to be the guys that step up in this new system. You have to learn a new system. You have to work with what is this new defensive coordinator going to do, because Rossi obviously did a great job of coaching this team, but now you have some roster turnover. Now you have coaching turnover, and that's going to challenge some of these guys. Henderson is a big time player, a good leader to have returning, and he will help that transition. Danny Strigo is one of those guys who, again, talk about flying under the radar, someone who's super underrated because he's on Minnesota. If he was on other teams, probably gets more recognition, but he is going to be in a good position. This Minnesota team is better suited for being an underdog. And Danny Strigo is one of those guys that fits in that category as well. 7 tackles for loss, 6 sacks. That shows you the kind of production that he's capable of giving Minnesota. And again, you're going to see this defense continue to fly under the radar. This is a defense that thrived under Rossi, and now you're still not seeing them get the love that they need, love that they deserve, really. And you're going to see what a veteran group can do with a new system. Yes, it's going to be a learning curve for a lot of people. It's going to be a little bit of a transition, but Minnesota has the talent to be a stifling defense once again. Kind of the underrated theme with Minnesota's defense. Justin Wally is another one of those players that fits into that category. He is someone who can compete with the best receivers in this conference. He can compete with some of the best in college football. An underrated player, after what you've seen from him the last couple years. You've seen some inconsistencies, but this is still someone who, again, is flying under the radar, not really well known in the collegiate ranks, not super well known, maybe even the NFL ranks yet either. But if you put together another big season, Justin Wally is going to get people on his film, and the bandwagon is going to fill up pretty quick because he's capable of being that shutdown corner. Minnesota's defensive line could be electric this year. When you look at the returning players they have on top of some of the transfer portal players they added, this is going to be a really good group. Ja Joyner is yet another player that fits into that category. 7.5 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks. Probably could be higher on this list, but I think that speaks to the underrated talent, that the talent level that this team possesses. And Ja Joyner is one of those guys. Came to the team and had a relatively good year for as I think that if you see the field a little bit more, if you're a joiner, you're going to produce more. And that's what's really exciting. I think that's what this staff is excited about for him. He's just getting started, and there's talent around him to help keep teams from, or prevent teams, I should say, from sending extra help his way. So that means that he's seen favorable matchups, a little bit easier one-on-one matchups where you don't have to worry about someone chipping you, double teams, that kind of stuff. This should be, once again, a really fun defense to watch. And like I said, they have the talent to make that happen. The linebacker position is also very interesting to me because when you look at a guy like Maverick Baranowski, you're looking at someone who is just getting started. You also have other guys like Devin Williams and Cody Lindenberg that will round out that group and make them a very talented group. This is the linebacker position for Minnesota has been a high energy group. And we talked about that with Jack Henderson. This is a team that thrives under their coach. When they are playing at a high level, it's because everyone is bought in to what Fleck is selling. Everyone is buying into that culture, knows exactly what's expected of them. They play with a lot of energy and they play fundamentally sound football. This is not going to be a team that wins purely off talent. They have a lot of things they need to do right. And when they're playing well, they do those things right. And Maverick Baranowski is another one of those players, a relatively newer player to this defense that is still, I think, learning the position and learning what he's capable of doing. But you saw some of the flashes of what his greatness could be. And if he takes another step forward after what we saw last year, this is going to be an all Big Ten type player. Everyone's got their eyes on the quarterback position. Max Brosmer comes in from New Hampshire, and everyone expects big things from him after what you saw with him last year. 3,400 yards, 29 touchdowns, and now he joins a new school that needs to take a step forward in the passing attack. Again, one of the worst passing attacks in college football, needs to improve if you're going to find balance, if you're going to find success. This was not a good effort by Minnesota's offense outside of the rushing attack, and now you have talented players returning after that disappointing year that are hungry for more success. You have guys like Brosmer coming in that have a chip on their shoulder, that are looking to prove that they can play at that next level. Brosmer is just as important as any player on this team, on this roster. And if he finds a way to thrive, then Minnesota is going to be in great hands. And we talked about Cody Lindenberg. An injury obviously limited him last year and probably could be higher on this list with his experience. I'm cautious, though, to see what he looks like post injury. And I don't have a ton of concerns, but I'm going to say let's just wait and see what happens here. Again, that linebacker position is going to be good for Minnesota's defense, and Cody Lindbergh is an experienced player who can be a leader for that group. And this is an experienced group, a talented group that, again, if they take the right steps forward, are going to be, once again, one of the tougher defenses to play, an underrated defense that's going to surprise people and probably give a lot of people headaches because they're not expecting to face this level of talent. Minnesota could be a bulking, once again, could be a team that exceeds expectations. PJ Fleck has a lot riding on this. If there's another down year, I think the hot seat conversation heats up a little bit more. But if he has a good year, I think that we need to take a step back and realize that Fleck knows what he's doing. Sometimes you're going to have a down year, and it's all about trusting the culture and getting the right players in position to do their jobs.